Our second panel is on the topic of increasing the impact of educators. Pasi Sahlberg is a Finnish education expert, visiting professor at Harvard University, and author of the award-winning book, Finnish Lessons, What Can the World Learn from Educational Change in Finland?
Thank you very much. I was supposed to say good morning, but now I have to say good afternoon. How about that? It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for giving me an opportunity to say something. My first question really to all of you is that, are you concerned about education? I think you should, if you heard what Lord Putnam was saying this morning, I think all of us, we should be concerned about that. I'm very concerned about that because when I look around the world, what's happening in the field of education, in most places we are just going the wrong way, wrong direction. The other thing I'm concerned today and this morning here is that I think what we're also seeing is this widening gap between the generations. Those people who were born when all these technological tools and digitalized devices were around, and then most of us. Is there anybody in the room who was born in the 1990s or after that here? Nobody. So we were all born when these things were not around. I can assure you one thing, that these young people, if this was a room full of people who were born when the computers and mobile phones were around, their world is very different, just like we heard earlier. And that's why I think we should, it's unfortunate that we don't have these young people here to tell us, educate us older ones, how to think, not how to use these things only, but how to think about all these wonderful devices and tools that we have around us. So what I'm going to tell in about 12 minutes is 3 things that I think make me very concerned about the whole question of what the teachers and educators can do in our schools. And then I have 3 things that I think could be like a pointers for the way forward. You know, the short answer to this question that we have in this panel, how can we increase the impact of educators, would be to help teachers to work together better. I don't believe that the problem really is teacher training or in-service training itself. I think the problem here and much of the rest of the world is that teachers are more and more insisted to work alone, isolated from one another, and that's the key. The answer to this question would be that let teachers teach. And now if you look at the teaching profession around the world, teachers are spending more and more time on all sorts of other things, but not teaching their children. And whether it's about technology or not technology, this is something that is preventing things to get better. So I have 3 things for you, and I'm going to just show you some numbers and facts about things that you already heard this morning. For me, one of the key things, not only here in Europe, but globally, is the increasing growing youth unemployment. Last year, according to ILO, there were 75 million 15 to 24-year-old young people who were not in education or work. 75 million people. It's about 700,000 young people more than previous year, and this is only going to get worse. So this number is not going to get any better anytime soon, and that's why I think this raises a question for us, that so what do we do? What does it mean for education? According to same estimates, within the next 10 years, about 1.3 billion young people will graduate from all sorts of educational institutions, vocational schools, colleges, universities, and so on. 1.3 billion people, young people. And as it is now, there will be jobs only for about 300 million of them. So one of the big questions we have today is that what are we going to do with this 1 billion young people who will not find a job? Or they may find something to do for a while, but there will be no permanent or even semi-permanent employment for a huge number of young people. This is an issue not only here in Europe, but this is a global thing. And I think that this is a fundamental thing to be included in this conversation of educators and technology, what we're going to do with this. My second concern is a thing that I called GERM, Global Educational Reform Movement. I like this because this acronym tells a lot about what is it all about. GERM is a kind of a virus or bug that is infecting both people and education systems around the world, that is making many of these things that we would like to see coming out of our education systems very difficult to accomplish. Okay? And this will be a longer story, but let me just mention a couple of things, 2 or 3 things that are kind of at the heart of this global educational reform movement. You know, global educational reform movement is not, it's a kind of my own and my colleagues' constellation of ideas when we try to answer the question that what is happening around the world in education, how the different education systems are trying to get better. And one of the probably the most common thing that you can find around the world is a kind of an increasing faith in competition as a driver of improvement and turnaround of education systems and schools. In other words, today schools and teachers are finding themselves in a situation where they have to compete against other schools more often than before. Okay? And that's why for me the logic is clear that if you compete more, then you have less space to collaborate, to do these things together. And that's why this competition is often seen as a problem in many education systems here in Europe as well, but certainly in North America, United States, where I live right now. The second one, the second element, item of this germ, or symptom, if you wish, is the increasing standardization of teaching and learning, and also assessment of students' performance. And again, this is something that goes against creativity and openness that we have been hearing here before. If we standardize teaching and with standardized curriculum, what is supposed to be taught in the schools, there will be less and less room for creativity. Often teachers in Finland, they say that the worst enemy of creativity in schools is standardization. So when we get into the business of standardizing schooling, then we can say goodbye to all of those wonderful ideas of taking risks and being creative and innovate, all these things. So this is one of those symptoms. And then there's increasing amount and focus on standardized testing. At the level of the national education systems, and now increasingly globally, we have this thing called PISA, Program for International Student Assessment, that is creating a kind of a global international beauty contest among education systems, which is again making real collaboration and cooperation more difficult than before. The unfortunate thing is with these international studies is that now the systems many education systems are setting their national policy goals according to where they want to be in these PISA league tables. And that's a wrong way to go, because then the focus will be away from all these things that we have been hearing here. And thirdly, and kind of a third issue that needs to be kept in the agenda if we want to move forward with this question and answers that this panel has, is the declining status of teachers and teaching profession around the world. And this is often because there are alternative pathways into teaching. Here in Europe, you can find Teach First. In the United States, is a Teach for America. And there are about 30 countries in the world that are now preparing teachers through alternative fast-tracked ways into our schools. In England, I think Teach First is the biggest single provider of new teachers today. It's not the universities anymore. Universities are not preparing teachers in England and many other parts of the world as they used to. And that's why maybe, but we have, according to the OECD TALIS data, only 19% of teachers in Europe, where we are right now, only 19% feel that their profession, their work is valued in a society. And that's why teachers are leaving schools, their jobs, often before the end of the 5th year. In the United States, half of the teachers, new teachers, are gone before they reach the 5th year of their service. And this is something that is equally important problem than dropouts of students. So how to go forward? What could be the ways in which Europe can lead the way? And by the way, I believe that if this continent, if Europe is smart enough in education policies, and this is much more than thinking about how to prepare young people with the skills or what to teach them through our school systems, how to train teachers. This is a much bigger question. But if Europe wants to lead the way in the world, in all of these new paradigms that you have been hearing here, we have an opportunity to do that right now. There's no better time than this when all these things that you have been hearing here are around us. The first one, I think we have to seriously think about the reprofessionalization of teaching. And this devaluing of teaching profession around the world is, and in Europe too, is going to cost us a lot of headache and a lot of money. So that's why I think teaching should be seen as a difficult, hard profession rather than easy, simple, that anybody can do. People often say that teaching is not rocket science, it's harder than that. And that's why I think we have to avoid those solutions where smart young people are brought into teaching profession from other fields for a few years, and then they leave and end up doing something else. So this real professionalism is a key that we need to do. And again, this is much more than just training teachers. This is also establishing and reinstituting the respect that teachers have had as important players in our societies. Then the other one is that I think that we should think about the role of the teachers and the work that they do in schools as something that will help young people to become change makers. And that's why, just remember these 1 billion young people who are not going to find a job during the next 10 years. It doesn't make any sense to think about that what are those skills, knowledge and skills that they need to be employed, because there will be no jobs. So that's why people often say that if you want a job, invent one. And now what our education systems are not doing systematically is to help young people to invent, create new ideas, create jobs for themselves. And that's why I think this change maker concept as one of the ideas of what the teachers do and what their job is helpful. And there, obviously, technology and all these new tools will play a very important role. The good news for all of those 1 billion people who will be disappointed with their education because they have been promised a job but they cannot find it is that to create a job today with all these facilities that we have around us is much easier and cheaper than ever before. And that's why I think the education should also, here in Europe particularly, focus on helping young people to understand how they can invent and create something for themselves. And thirdly and finally, I think it's time also to go a little bit deeper in the conversation of what is the purpose of schooling. Why do we have schools where our children and young people are supposed to learn something? Somebody said earlier that we are spending a lot of time on trying to solve the problems, but we actually don't know what the problem is. And Einstein, somebody was referring to Einstein also. Let me do one Einstein citation here. Einstein said that if I have a problem and 1 hour to solve it, I will spend 59 minutes to understand and define the problem, and then I will solve it in 1 minute. And what we are doing in education meetings like this, that we often spend 59 minutes to try to solve the problem, and this 1 minute to understand what it is. And I think the real challenge for us is to really ask ourselves that what is the purpose of schooling? Why do we have a place called school? And Sir Ken Robinson is one of those who has been thinking about this a lot, and in his new book, he has a nice, very compact idea of how could we look at the purpose of the schooling. He's saying that the purpose of schooling is that young people would understand the world around them. This is a kind of an old, traditional way of thinking about the world, and the talents within them. And this is exactly what would help young people to, create themselves the future and jobs that we are not doing systematically. We are doing the first part of this idea very well, I think, in many parts of the world, but the second one not systematically. And that's why I think that if you think about this new purpose of schooling from the point of view of teachers and teaching profession, it will mean that we have to think about also teachers and teaching in a completely new way. Teaching is not going to get any easier with this type of thing. Actually, it's going to be much more complicated because this includes aspects like personalized learning, teamwork by teachers, and many other things. People will come with the different types of expectations into your classroom, and you have to be able to deal with these diversities. So my conclusion here is that teaching is going to be much more complex and complicated than it used to be before, and that's why this question of how do we work and help teachers and educators is a critical one. Thank you.
Thank you, Pasi, and for being spot on with timing. That was fantastic. Interesting point there, which is a very important point about the devaluation of the teaching profession, which is something I think some people here might want to touch on a bit later today. And also interesting to know that that acronym GERM, Global Education Reform Movement, was heard here today, and I'm sure is going to be repeated in many places over the coming weeks. Gregor Mohorcic is Director General of the Slovenian Preschool and Basic Education Directorate. From 2006 to 2014, he was Director of the National Education Institute of Slovenia. During that time, he ran several projects regarding e-education, e-materials, e-textbooks, and e-school bag, and piloting them into primary and secondary education in Slovenia. Gregor, what kind of experience with this in connection with digital learning do you have in Slovenia?
Thank you, John. I'm really great pleasure to be here to present not just the results or the ideas of our work, but also in general to present some conclusions, some questions which we tackle when we run these projects. And I will focus on four points. First one is definitely that when you change the education, when you want to change the education, then you definitely need this strategy how to do that. And in this strategy, there also be strategy how to change this in the information society, how this information society will deal within this strategy. So what was very important that at that time in Slovenia, that we have a common strategy plan, especially in digital information, how will we change our society, but not our society, our school system in particular. So we focus, in this strategy, we focus on three, someone could say a basic element, but for us it was very important. It was important that professional development was part of it, and the second one was e-content, and the third one is environment. But not just environment to put the tablets, but to establish all the environment around this strategy. So these three components should work together to achieve better results. If you miss some of this area, then definitely you miss also or forget the goals to achieve goals in another area. The second major point for me is that we should establish conditions in environment where changes could happen. And schools are part of this environment. They are not just schools, they're also all other sectors that are connected. And at that time, we focus with difficulties how to achieve how to make a bigger step, because the society was not accepting our strategy, and also teachers some of them, they were against of our new ideas. So we have to focus and prepare teachers and head teachers, both, to accept different kind of roles. One part they were teachers, the second part they were mentor, experts, coach. There were also change aiders, learner in some way, and of course we are a couple of teachers who are against of everything. So we have to deal also with those who are against, to see, to hear them what they think we are doing wrong. and establish a good school climate. That what Pasi said, that that cooperation could start, or teamwork could start. That start with the talks between teachers, between themselves, between head teachers with teachers can discuss openly openly about the problems, about the goals, about the issues. So we open the floor to everybody, and this at that time was very important when you start with strategy on digital literacy. And at that time it was much easier to put in the schools our idea how the digital literacy have to look like, because we prepared the schools before that. And then in 2009, we accept major project about e-content, about e-education, about e-learning environment. We produce a lot of interactive textbooks and connected with professional development also, and also with guidelines how to achieve goals, how to teachers achieve goals to use this kind of technology. And just last sentence, what is really important for me is that we prepare the progress how to educate teachers to use this content in e-learning environment, in new e-learning environment. And we prepare a booklet for them how to achieve this, and beside we separate this into 6 sub-competencies, and behind each these sub-competencies we have a specific professional development for the head teachers and for the teachers. But right now we have some questions also when we not finished, but when we have this, when we evaluating this, and for us it's a major question right now: are the teachers prepared enough for this big shift? When we are talking about this big shift, and of course, are also society prepared enough for this big shift? Because we are talking that we need something new in education, but our society try to, or are willing to accept our ideas to shift education, because the students are definitely need this big shift. Thank you.
Gregor, thank you. In my eagerness with timing, I, of course, missed out the opportunity for my colleague here, Maria, so my apologies to her.
No, it's okay, it's okay. So it was very nice because we heard all these nice ideas, and now I can do the connection with the discussion that we had online, and they are very in line with what you also described and you very well analyzed in the impact statement. Let's see. One of the things that we wanted, let's say we discussed a lot, and an issue is the educators continuing the professional development. So I think that from the 3 topics, this is the common topic that it was emerged from all our discussions. So people cannot just have, let's say, the ability to start using technology. Teachers need to have this idea of lifelong learning and continuous training on all this. Another thing that we have discussed a lot, it was about the mass personalization on learning. This is something that you also, on this you referred also before. So how can we do this? You can also tell us, you can suggest some approaches, because people are very, very, very interested in this issue. And also, people and teachers, but from both sides. Let's say a teacher as a student as well, but also only students, learner and students, let's say. They wanted to, let's say, express their interest about massive open online courses. We hope that this is not a trend, but this is something new that will change for the best our education. I will also want to thank our contributors and our animator on this topic, Stylianos Mistakidis.
Thanks, Maria.
Okay.
It's time as well for our next poll. So get your pads ready. Here are the questions for you. I'll read them out this time, so if everybody is perhaps not able to see the screen clearly. Digital technologies and open practices, A, will replace educators. B, will make educators less important. C, will help educators if used and developed right. Or D, empower educators if used right. Now bear in mind your light will stay on just for a brief period when you press it, but if you'd like to have a read of those and decide which of those you think is the most important, we'll get the results of those polls a little later in the panel. Graham Brown Martin was the founder of Learning Without Frontiers, and he spent the last 2 years traveling to 18 countries doing a comparative study on digital platforms on learning. Recently published by Bloomsbury, and he's been doing fantastically well. Graham, do you see the use of digital platforms in education as an enabler of new teaching practices or reinforcer of existing ones?
Okay, so I've just been making notes this morning around some of these issues, and with the greatest respect to previous speakers, I think that it's delusional, what I've heard, in the sense that, we're talking about this place called the future, like it really exists, like it's a place. It all has to be digital. We need lots of digital coders. That's the only way we're going to survive. And the future isn't a place. It doesn't exist. We, as a society, as a European society, have an agency. We have agency. We can make the decisions. We don't, of course, because what we do is we're so in love with some of the very large corporations that aren't based in Europe, but make profits from Europe, but pay no tax and use their infrastructure. As long as we allow that to go on, we're on this train called technological determinism. So I wanted to draw a line on that first, because I've been to quite a few of these very well-intentioned summits, but we still have this belief that we don't have agency in what the future looks like and the shaping of our society. And I think it's important then to think about what education is. And education, frankly, is a structure designed to maintain the status quo, not to enable transformation. That's not what education does. It's like mass media and religion. It makes us believe that we have the society that we need. Even Illich said that many years ago. And of course, these conversations about technology are irrelevant unless we have the conversation that Pasi was talking about. As what is education for? What is it about now in this world? And I think the institutes that we have at the moment, where kids don't fit, those kids are defined as dysfunctional. And yet these are the ones that are the outliers, that are creative, that are inventive and so forth. They're not, because we have an education system based around an empire, initially the British Empire, which wanted to create office workers, clerks. So when we expanded our empire, there were people there, they were retired, they could use a pen and all that kind of stuff. So when we're talking about all these digital jobs, what do we really mean? Do we mean a digital job is you're going to go and drive at minimum wage for Uber on a zero contract? So I think there's some issues around there before I get to answer the question. And actually, none of these issues are new. It's like we think it's new. I mean, I think that the delusional here is that those changes happening fast. There's no change. There's no structural change. We still have gender inequality. We still have racism. Look at what happened in Ferguson. Nothing's changed. Capitalism writ large. Google, Facebook, Amazon, and so on, they have not disrupted anything. They've not disrupted capitalism. They've perfected it. It's the concentration of wealth to a smaller number of people and organizations, while our European Commission just sit by and let it happen. Maybe we'll break up Google and so forth. So where am I going with this? It's not new. Dewey was talking about this. Is it about self-determination? Is it about the curriculum and so on? That's a false dichotomy. And I think that without having, I've seen in my trips a number of, every school I went to, didn't matter what kind of technology they had there. I went into science labs that had 3D projections. But what made it work was a brilliant teacher. And okay, the role of the teacher might change, might become a coach, but you need the teacher. This idea that somehow technology is a kind of an outcome, and then we can offload this to learning analytics and adaptive learning. What a crock. The reality of those things is it's Taylorism. Frederick Taylor, who perfected the scientific method, had his fingers in so many of the educational pies. And this is like someone from like the 19th century. And if all we're doing is actually having an algorithm, and this is the point about reinforcing. If we are going to use technology to reinforce existing practice, and I think that's what we're doing, because we're not having conversations. I haven't heard a conversation here about how we transform our learning system, properly transform it, liberate teachers, liberate learners. What I hear about is we've got to stuff this content and get these skills out of these kids. And the problem is when you have a digital conversation, when I send a parcel from Belgium to London, 100 digital conversations take place between me and that parcel, which I can't get involved in because I'm not fast enough. And when this technology becomes more and more invisible, when it goes from our laptop to our smartphone to our wearables to embedded technology, we are unaware of those algorithms. We're unaware of what those algorithms do. All we hear is a voice in our head that says turn left and turn right, and we don't question. And I think if we talk about digital literacy and what that is, digital literacy is the same as media literacy. It's understanding when you're being cheated. And I think the problem is that we have with where we potentially are going at the moment is actually using technology to crystallize and reinforce 19th century practice. When we talk about the 21st century, we're adopting 20th century ideas adapted to this century, and that, I think, has to change. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, there's certainly plenty there for, I think, some interesting discussion during the panel and questions and comments from the floor. Right? So I hope we get a bit more input there. John Higgins is Director General of Digital Europe. John, what is it that the industry can bring to the education table?
So thank you very much, John. And I will come to that in a moment. But what I thought I'd cover in my 4 minutes, 55 seconds is just to pick up why we are now at a second wave of digital technologies and what that means. I will then argue that we really do need to put professionals at the heart of this. And then I will answer the question of what can the tech sector particularly bring to the market. You know, when I was doing my homework for this, I looked back to how long have we been going with digital technologies? And I found that the first programmable, commercially available computer was only in 1951. Of course, the Brits claim it, but then we claim the first of everything. I've actually been involved in this industry, I realized, for more than half of its life. I started as a systems analyst in the late 70s. And my experience of this industry is it's nearly always been about satisfying people's needs. It's not a push industry, it's a pull industry. If I think about why my mother wanted an upgraded tablet, it wasn't because she liked the look of the new one or because somebody told us to get it. It's because she wanted to look at pictures of her grandchildren, and that was the easiest way she could do it. So I very much argue that it's a sort of pull technology that, in all my experience, has been creating opportunities and solving problems for people. What's different about today? You know, why do I say it's a second wave? Well, when I think about the technologies that we have today with super fast networks, most of which carry video, as you said, not voice message anymore, we have I think by 2020 we'll have 50 billion things connected together, all pushing data into this network. So we have a massive amount of data that we didn't have before. We're improving our analytics capability, so we're learning how to make sense of that data. And of course, everything's going mobile. I mean, more than half of the connections to this sort of network now are mobile. So we've got a really significant change, and it's different to the first half of the ICT progress. It's different. It is very different now. And I think what's happening is, whereas before the people who were pulling this technology in were at the edges, they're now at the core. What do I mean by that? Well, you know, when I first started, digital technology was in the office. Now it's in the factory. It's disrupting and changing the way we manufacture and make things. It was in the administrators. Now it's the medics. The medics realize they can do a better job with technology. And in the education field, it was in the office, it was the clerks, but now it's the teachers. It's the teachers who think, you know, I could use this stuff to do a better job. And so it's really driving at the heart. And at the same time as it's driving into the heart of what we do, we've got this massive systems failure, which Lord Putnam referred to. 96% of principals think they're doing a good job equipping people for the world, and what was it, 14% of the students have shared that same experience. So we've got a massive system failure in the middle of that. I would disagree with you on only one point that you raised, and that's about competition, because I've been a governor of a university for a dozen years or so, and what I've seen is competition drive excellence, and it doesn't drive out collaboration. I think you know, used well. I can see the tension, obviously, but I think competition really does drive excellence. So that's sort of what's going on in this second wave. I do think, in all my experience, in all of, you know, whether it's the factory or whether it's the medics, it's as soon as you put this technology in the hands of the professionals and say to them, use these tools to do what you want to do best, and you show them how to do it, you give them the time to do it, that's when you get the results. If you impose things on them, nobody wants to be changed, lots of people like change. And so if you impose it, it doesn't work, you've got to equip, empower, give them time, freedom to create ways. And I've seen lots of examples of that across lots of different sectors. Give people the tools and they will find out smart ways to use it. So let me turn very briefly then to the final question, you know, how to work with industry and how to particularly perhaps work with the tech industry. And one of the things I've really been struck by is that when you ask industry to bring real-life problems to the table, into the classroom, into the universities, it's a really enriching experience. So ask them to bring your problems. Show them, ask them to come in and say, okay, tech industry, you're having to deal with some pretty advanced medical challenges using technology. Try and create a scenario where you can bring that into the education field. So ask industry to bring you the problems that they are dealing with in other sectors, to create realistic scenarios so that students don't just get an understanding of how to use technology in education, but how technology is being used elsewhere to solve many of our other really challenging societal problems. And I think that's how you can best work with industry. So I hope we talk a lot in the sector about, you know, hype. We're criticizing with hype, but I genuinely believe we're at a different point. It's a deep wave. I don't believe it's about bad guys pushing technology on people. I think it was ever thus that it's people spotting tools and working out how they can do what they want to do better with those tools. You have to put professionals at the heart. It doesn't work any other way. It never has, never will. And you work with industry in some. Treat them as collaborators, work with them to share some of the challenges that they've got, and it will enrich the educational experience. Thank you, John.
Pasi, you want to say something?
Can I comment a little bit on what you said? You know, if you watch the film Ivory Tower that you mentioned here earlier, it becomes clear that higher education, that you mentioned as a kind of a good example of competition, higher education has been moving from being education to business, and it works very much like according to the business laws. But my comment was mostly about primary and secondary schools, and there's a lot of not only research evidence from Chile, Australia, Sweden, many other countries that have experimented this large-scale competition and choice trials, but also the OECD PISA data is very clear about that. The OECD actually concludes now that the competition and choice across the OECD countries is not associated to increasing growing excellence. Actually, it's the equity that is driving the improvement. So, but I just want to make this kind of a distinction between higher education as business private business in many cases, including my own university, and public education that is educating primary and secondary school children.
Okay. John, could I just ask you your response to what Graham was saying about basically a delusional approach to the whole issue?
Well, we're at such fundamentally different ends of the spectrum, I don't really know where to start, really, because I genuinely believe that. You know, I've worked with tech companies across the world. I've worked in the States, I've worked in Asia, I've worked widely in Europe, I've worked with large companies, small companies. Yeah, but they want to make a living, that's for sure. They want to employ people. They mostly want to solve problems. That the golden thread to me that runs through the tech industry. It's populated by people who want to solve problems. Now, of course, it's the business world, and you've got return to shareholders and capitalism as a system and all that, but it's mostly populated by people who want to solve problems. And I think it's been tremendously successful because it satisfies people's needs. Solve problems, it's allowed them to connect. It's done all sorts of things that people want. And of course, we could get into a much deeper debate as well, what forms people's views of what they want, of course, but fundamentally, I do think that the tech sector has prospered because it creates opportunities and solves problems.
Graham?
Yeah, delusional. Totally delusional. I just traveled around the world. I've spent time living in refugee camps in Syria. I've been up a mountain post-earthquake China. I've been out into Bahar, very distant part of Bahar, which is media dark. The reality is we have a totally inequitable society. The majority of people on the planet have much less. Actually, that's also true in Europe. We're seeing unemployment going off the scale. We're having this nonsense talked about the digital economy creating jobs. It's not, it's taking jobs. It's using the infrastructure that we as taxpayers pay for, education, healthcare. Someone breaks into your Amazon warehouse, the police turn up, etc. And yet they contribute very little in terms of corporation tax for those aspects. So I think that, you know, and the notion about people want to make change, I'm sure that's true. I mean, I also had a very successful career in the technology industry. I've built and sold many companies to very large organizations through technology. My criticism of technology doesn't make me anti-technology. It doesn't make me anti-modern. I mean, this is a trope that those in the digital community and the technology community regularly trot out. You criticize it, therefore you must be anti-modern. Let's face it, this industry, the digital industry as we see it today, is 5 companies. It's Google, it's Amazon, it's Facebook, and maybe Microsoft. Did I miss one? Do you know what I mean? But the point is, that's it. This idea of the digital world is somehow neutral. It's like, well, everyone, it's democratic. It's nonsense. It's who has the most servers. So this isn't a free-for-all. This isn't open. And as much as I do appreciate the vigor of Pasi's idea, go and invent a job, it's a lot harder in this world now. We've got we've gone from the industrial capitalist to the digital capitalist. They haven't really changed anything. And this is, I'm not an anti-capitalist. I've sold businesses. I've had shareholders and so forth. What I'm saying is we don't have the metrics. We've got a new version. I mean, someone referred to this as a new industrial revolution. No, it's not. It's just continuation of existing business. And I think that until we have the regulatory and ethical framework within Europe, we're always going to be kowtowing to these companies. There's lots of innovation. There's a ton of innovation happening in digital platforms. But organizations, predatory, aggressive organizations like Facebook and Google are stamping them out. And now we have Uber as an example running around. And okay, I have to say, I think the black taxi cabs in London deserve their asses being kicked. But you know what I mean? Now, it's looking very bad. I was with a person who had a shop for 15 years, had to sell the shop because a supermarket opened next door. Now he's running around. He's an old guy. He's like he's in his early 60s, driving like 18-hour days for Uber at minimum wage. Is that the Europe that we want? I think we need to understand what is our economy. It's not anti-digital. If we want to be active in the digital world, if Europe wants to be active and successful in the digital world, then we need the regulatory framework to enable European businesses and European individuals to succeed.
I don't want to argue with all of those things, but just one thing to bear in mind is that over time, as these platforms have emerged that enable people to do business, and you didn't mention eBay and things, but as these platforms emerge, I've seen it over the years, that hundreds, if not thousands, of small business thrive on those. In Europe, we have thousands and thousands of small digital businesses that thrive on the back of these platforms. So, we haven't got time to go to, and it's probably not the right forum for it either. And I understand I do understand these issues of disruption. We're not blind to the issues of disruption that technology causes. But I think about this, in the context of the World Cup. Germany won the World Cup by working out how to play the game better than anyone else and then beating Brazil 7-1. We didn't do it by pretending that football wasn't a game we wanted to play anymore. Anyway, I'm sure you want to go on to some of the topics, John.
Well, what I would like to invite actually some comments and questions from the audience as well. But just before I do that, we have the poll results, I've been informed, for us to see. If we could just put those poll results up, please. There we go. Overwhelming, it seems, for empower educators if used right. A very decisive result to that particular poll. Now, as I was saying, is there anybody, before we move on to another topic, there was a hand that went up just over here. Do we have a microphone down just in front of the camera?
You've got one over here.
If you could just give your name and your organization, please.
Thank you very much indeed. My name is Aria Krauchenberg, and I'm here for the European Parents Association, and I find it very interesting that we talk here about educators all the time, and we are mainly talking about teachers and schools. I would like to mention that actually educators, the primary educators we're talking about, are parents. Primary not only in the sense of the first in the chronology, but also probably the most impacting. And if we are talking about empowering educators, then we should talk to parents and bring them on board, because otherwise everything we are doing, if that's contrary to what happens in the homes, will have at best no effect, at worst a terrible effect. Thank you very much.
Thank you. There's another comment or question down here at the front.
I'm Richard Straub, President of the European Drucker Society and Secretary General of the European Learning Industry Group. I would just like to reinforce a point which was made about the current situation. I have the impression often in the discussion that we are talking about further slightly improving here and there, and we see some issues. We have not achieved much in the last 15 years, it seems, when it comes to technology in learning. But currently we are in a situation which could be described as dramatic, and I think you made the point. We see technology moving into the knowledge jobs for the first time. And we have already youth unemployment, and we see technology taking, potentially, of course, if something happens that we cannot understand right now, but potentially taking away significant jobs in areas where people from with a university education could find jobs. So that means we are talking about fundamental issues of our society, and we are trying to address them with selected policies in an area of doing something here, a little bit in teacher training and something in technology deployment. So I think for the European Commission, it's also the time to wake up to the real issue, which is the future of our society and which role education can play. And if the old policy to move everybody towards tertiary education is a solution of the future problems, only the very top people may find jobs in the future knowledge society where these medium jobs may be taken by computers. So we need to think about all this, and that's my only point. I think it's more dramatic than the Commissioner indicated today, and some people seem to think.
Thank you. Graham, you want to make one?
I mean, I want to concur. I think that you expressed that, articulated it far better than I could. I think we have a European society, we have a European Commission. I think that it's what society do we want to have as Europeans in 2030? What does it look like? How do we get there? I think only when we've had that conversation can we then plan? Can the Commission and all the good people that are involved, because I don't think anyone is particularly, I mean, we might disagree, but I think we have the same interests at heart. But we don't have that conversation, and if we don't have that conversation, we can't have the next conversation, which is what is school for? You know, is it just daycare, or does it have another purpose? And I think the gentleman is absolutely right. I mean, we're trying to set policies pretty much using 20th century thinking. I mean, everybody here was born in the 20th century, not this century, and so we still have that. That's how we were brought up. And the structures, there's powerful structures. I mentioned some of them earlier: mass media, religion, education, the judicial system, that are designed not to change, to maintain what we have. So us as a society, agency, need to have a conversation about how we see ourselves in 2030.
Thank you.
For example.
Just before I take some more questions from the floor, I'm interested to know what's happening online.
We have many questions, and very interesting questions. So, something for our panel here. Do we need to measure success to learn from it? And if so, how? Without counter-productive testing?
Anybody want to ask?
Can you say it again? I missed the...
Yes.
Sorry, which one is it?
It is this one. Do we need to measure success to learn from it? And if so, how? Without counterproductive testing?
Wow.
Difficult, yes.
Yeah, no, I think that I would say a little bit what Graham was saying, that people often think when you raise questions about standardized testing that people are against standardized testing. I think that's not the point here. But what we are doing, how we are testing our particularly young children, and often teachers too, is completely against all these things that we want to see. And there are much smarter and more intelligent ways of measuring and monitoring the progress of learners and teachers as well than we are employing right now. So that's where we need to probably work much harder on, or use the knowledge that we have created earlier.
Can I make a comment
Yes.
on that? That's sort of agreeing with you very much that we do need to try and paint a picture, and we need to ask our young people to paint a picture of the sort of world they want to have in 20, 30, 50 years. I don't think it would be very difficult to do that because we know what they care about. They very much care more than perhaps our generation did about sustainability, about climate change. You know, we know this. We could sort of paint the picture of the world that they want in those years to come. And then we could step back and say, well, what does that mean for employment? We could start to try and anticipate. And I think that is the role of our policymakers, to try and anticipate that. And then say, where do you want to use technology to help you get there? And how do you cope with the disruption? You know, but do you remember back in, you know, when manufacturing industry got ripped out of much of Western Europe and a government response was, what do we do now? You know, it's gone. I hadn't anticipated it going. So we could anticipate. And then we could try to, in answering the question, we could try and set up some measures of success to see how well we've done that journey. So I would agree with you, you know, having an idea about what sort of future we want seems to be the right starting point.
Okay.
Question for Graham.
Yes, we have a question. In John Graham, it is Nicholas Kidd who is asking. In John Graham, but what do you think that the regulatory framework looks like in the education sector, and how do we get there?
Yeah, that's a great question. I like that one. A regulator, I mean, obviously, I'm going to apply it to some technology. I mean, for example, you know, something that you'll have come across. If you haven't, you will. Learning analytics, adaptive learning, and so forth. And it sounds great when you say it quickly. We even had a government minister in the UK that said actually teaching, looking forward to the death of teaching, because the imparting of knowledge no longer has to be done because computers can do that. And then the teachers do the sort of human thing, whatever that happens to be. I don't know, wipe their noses or something. But of course, it's a very reductive view of what teaching and learning is about. And I think one of the issues around the algorithms that are used to assess the data that is being fed to it, they will inevitably have a bias. I mean, they're written by humans. You know, they have bias. But the implication of that could be quite catastrophic if you roll that out to an entire nation, a particular way of teaching history, for example, that's based around this technology. So I think in terms of regulatory framework, we have to, I think we should attempt to enshrine it, at least into European law, that these algorithms, all of them, are open source and in the public domain. So that, you know, so it's Pearson. I mean, you know, do we want the future to be personalized? I'm not sure. You know, when did personalized learning become computer-driven? But if it is going to become computer-driven, I think then we, as citizens, have a right to know what you know, we should see the source code, is what I'm saying. So I think that one of the regulatory frameworks, I would say, is that the commercial organizations that are working within our system at the moment must open up those algorithms, and they must be transparent.
Gregor, what do you think about that?
Are we talking about teachers, or are we talking about...
Well, in relation to teachers.
I mean, the tools are definitely... The computers will not replace the teachers, that definitely. And I don't agree with John when mentioned before that we just put the technology to them and they will use properly technology. But we have to teach them how to use, because from my experience, when we put the technology, they usually start those who are really enthusiastic about it, and then this enthusiasm is lowered down because they're not what they think that the tools will help them with the teachers. So we definitely need to educate them how to use this in proper way.
Thank you. Unfortunately, I can't take any more questions at this point. John has to leave us. He has another speaking engagement.
But not as much fun as this one, I can say.
Oh. I'm pleased.